Team participation in the state tournament grants automatic permission and the use of these photos by the Colorado Bar Association. If there is anyone in the gallery who is connected with teams not competing in this round, student members and coaches of other schools, or of the same school but a different team, you are asked to please leave the virtual courtroom at this time. I would remind the teams that there are no recesses, with the exception of those granted for a health emergency, and especially not between the end of witness examination and the beginning of closing arguments. I think we've already taken care of this, but just to confirm, do any of the scoring panelists have any reason to believe they might be biased in judging either of these teams? If you do, if you could just put your camera on and tell me you do. Otherwise, I'll assume not. Okay. The teams and the coaches are reminded that any disputes arising out of this competition must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. The teams are reminded that their compliance with time requirements will be considered in scoring individual performances. At this time, if I could have each team introduce their participating team members, beginning please with the plaintiff.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Bonsi Gowda, and I will be performing the opening statement, as well as the direct examination of Dakota Weirs and the cross-examination of Blake Doncourt. Permission for my co-counsel to introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Owen Pontius. I will be conducting the preliminary matters along with the direct examination of Dr. Casey Rogers and the cross-examination of Dr. Devin Williams.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Braden Tours, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of witness Carson Durst, as well as the cross-examination of witness Skylar Weirs. I will also be delivering the closing statements for the plaintiff. At this time, Your Honor, I would now like to request permission for my witnesses to introduce themselves.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Quincy Wing, and I am Dakota Weirs today.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Isabel Spencer, and I am Carson Durst.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. I'm Ava Neal, and today I'm Dr. Casey Rogers.
Thank you all. And if I could now have the defense, please introduce their members.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Sasha Latak, and today I will be presenting the opening statement, as well as giving the direct examination of Blake Doncourt and the cross-examination of Carson Durst.
Good afternoon. My name is DJ Quinn. I'll be performing the direct examination of Skylar Weirs, the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs, and as well as handling preliminary matters.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Harriman, and I will be performing the direct examination of Dr. Devin Williams, the cross-examination of Dr. Casey Rogers, and I'll be delivering the closing argument. Permission for our witnesses to introduce themselves?
Ready.
My name is Max Morin, and I will be portraying the witness Blake Doncourt.
My name is DNR, and I will be portraying the witness Skylar Weirs today. My name is Jordan Bard, and I'll be portraying the witness of Dr. Devin Williams.
Thank you all. At this time, I will need to administer oaths to the team members, the witnesses, the gallery members, and our scoring panelists. I will ask that counsel please stand to take your oaths. With respect to the others, I think under the circumstances we can have you remain seated, but I will ask that when taking an oath, you all raise your right hands. So beginning with team members. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Please signify by saying I will or I do. Right, thank you. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Please signify by saying I will or I do. Thank you. For our gallery members, including teacher and attorney coaches, family members, and friends, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to represent yourselves as positive role models and to behave in a manner that exemplifies ethical and professional sportsmanship during and after this mock trial round? Please signify by saying I will or I do. And finally, our scoring panelists, if you would raise your right hands. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible, in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition? Again, please signify by saying I will or I do.
I will.
I do.
Thank you. Especially for the benefit of team members, I recognize that at times, because we are doing this virtually, there may be slight glitches in the transmission. That's not held against you in any way. It's unfortunate situation that we're all having to deal with. If I speak up about it, it's just to call your attention to the fact that there may be difficulty hearing you because of such a problem. And you may certainly repeat yourselves, or we can take whatever other steps we may need to in order to ensure that you get to do your full presentations. Are there any preliminary matters, beginning first with the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor, we have a few preliminary matters before we start. First,
You may
the plaintiff
proceed
requests
with
that the
those.
stipulated facts of the case be submitted into evidence to assist the jury's understanding of the case.
Does the defense have any objection to that?
No, Your Honor.
The stipulated facts are received, and the scoring panelists may consider them, or the jury may consider them.
Next, the plaintiff requests that the witness be allowed a copy of exhibit packets, clean and unmarked, and a personal witness statement nearby for expediency's sake.
Does defense have any objection to that mode of proceeding?
No, Your Honor.
And
That request is
finally,
granted.
the plaintiff requests that all extra time for closing statement be reserved for a rebuttal statement.
You may reserve your time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Does the defense have any other preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. Do you have copies of all of the exhibits and stipulated facts from the court case?
I believe that we all do. If any of the scoring panelists lack those, again, you can just turn on your camera and signify that. But I believe everyone does.
Your Honor, permission to stop time in the case of technical difficulties?
Yes, I think we will probably try to keep going if at all possible. But yes, I understand your concern, and we will definitely try to do that.
Your Honor, permission for exhibits to be constructively published to the jury after the exhibit has been admitted into evidence?
That is granted.
No further preliminary matters, Your Honor.
All right, we can begin then with our opening statements. Plaintiff's opening, please.
Good afternoon, members of the jury. My name is Monty Gata, and I, along with my colleagues Braden Tours and Owen Pontius, have the privilege of representing the plaintiff, Ms. Dakota Weirs, in today's trial. The doctrine of negligence does not require the elimination of all risk from the party's conduct, only all unreasonable risk. Unreasonable risk is best defined as a risk that caused foreseeable harm due to conduct. Unreasonable risk is the reason why Dakota Weirs brings her case to court today. Unreasonable risk is the reason why Ms. Weirs struggles with non-Hodgkin lymphoma and the reason why her dreams and passions have been crushed. Unreasonable risk is best defined as what Lush Fertilizer failed to identify and therefore causing the life of a young woman to be drastically ruined. An unreasonable risk is the reason why Lush Fertilizer will be held accountable and will be charged with the crimes of negligence. Before I get into the evidence, let me tell you a little bit about Ms. Weirs. Ms. Weirs is 20 years of age and loves to play the piano. However, she won't be able to anymore. Prior to being diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, Ms. Weir was an extremely talented pianist who had high hopes and potential. She was meant to go to Juilliard and was bound for great success, but due to her illness, she was unable to. Everything she had worked towards has been ripped away from her. Ms. Weirs will tell you about her life prior to getting diagnosed and how terribly it's affected her life now. She will also tell you about why exactly Lush Fertilizer is the reason behind her illness. I'm sure you'll enjoy from hearing from Ms. Weirs and find that she's a kind and trustworthy person. So today, bringing forth true hard proof of the negligence of Lush Fertilizer, the members of the jury will hear from 3 witnesses today. You will hear from Dakota Weirs, Carson Durst, and expert witness, Dr. Casey Rogers. The first witness that will be called today is Dakota Weirs. Dakota Weirs stands here today in court to hold Lush Fertilizer accountable for the unregulated use of Drufo in their product, therefore causing her to fall ill with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The next witness that will be called is Carson Durst. Previously employed at Lush Fertilizer, Carson has seen the development of Drufo and has insight on the possible precautions Lush Fertilizer could and should have taken to protect customers from any possible injury. Durst will explain his own research as well as other studies that back up the claim that Drufo has many carcinogenic qualities. The final witness that will be called is expert witness Dr. Casey Rogers. Rogers has a PhD in agriculture and entomology, as well as a Bachelor of Science degree in agriculture and chemistry. He brings forth vital evidence, backed by logic and reasoning, that prove the inconsistencies in the product Drufo itself and the harmful effect it can have on customers. His study's results will prove the direct correlation between exposure to Drufo and cancer. You will hear from the defense shortly after, and what they aspire, or hope, or anticipate to do today is exculpate Lush Fertilizer from all charges of negligence. However, they will fail to do one very vital thing: tell the full story. They will hide important evidence from you. They will claim that the solid evidence proving Lush Fertilizer's negligence is just manufactured in a desperate attempt to win the case. And in the end, all the defense will show is speculation, conjecture, and reasonable doubt. However, the plaintiff brings full evidence, substantial evidence that will prove that Lush Fertilizer was in fact negligent. This case is one further than just the negligence of Lush Fertilizer. It's about the dreams of a young woman being taken away from her. While Lush Fertilizer may try to hide their negligence with false claims, they will never succeed, because today, members of the jury, the plaintiff brings the cold, hard facts of the case and the only likely outcome. And at the end, I will return and find that you find in favor of Ms. Weirs and award fair damages for the pain and disability she has suffered at the hands of the defendant. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the defense like to make an opening statement at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. Picture this: thousands of miles of ocean where little to nothing lives. You're probably asking yourself, why does nothing live there? The short answer: pollution. What causes this pollution? Synthetic nitrogen in fertilizer that causes algae and bodies of water to bloom faster than the ecosystem can handle. Why is this bad? It causes large amounts of fish to die and toxins and bacteria to grow. A solution to this pollution: Drufo. What are the benefits of using Drufo, the bonding agent in Lush Fertilizer? Decrease in nitrogen runoff. Decrease in the amount it needs to be applied per year. Decrease exposure to the product. In essence, Lush Fertilizer's responsibility is to deliver a safe, reliable product that decreases nitrogen pollution. Not only do they show this commitment through their products, but with their significant charity work as well. Dakota Weirs worked at Havens Landscaping for a number of years. Her responsibility while working there was to wear protective gear, such as long sleeves, pants, and a mask. You'll find that Dakota didn't consistently wear protective gear. even though her boss told her to do so, even though she was working with chemicals that had warning labels on them, even though those chemicals could cause her to develop something like cancer. Dakota wants you to believe that Drufo is the cause of her cancer. The fact is, Dakota used harmful chemicals and fertilizers longer than she ever did with Lush fertilizer. Those products are the reason Dakota developed cancer, not Drufo. This case is about responsibility. The responsibility Lush fertilizer had when putting products on the market. The responsibility Dakota Weirs had when working with harmful chemicals and fertilizers. You'll hear from founder and CEO of Lush Fertilizer, Blake Doncourt. He'll tell you that the company's extensive research and testing before putting their products on the market did not identify cancer to be a specific risk, and that the reason Lush doesn't put any warning labels on their products is because there's little to no risk while using them. This fact isn't just verified by Lush, but by the EPA. Dr. Casey Rogers, an agricultural researcher, conducted a study on Drufo, where she observed 3 groups' exposure to varying amounts of Drufo. Dr. Rogers' study was inconclusive because she failed to take into account how the use of protective gear could affect the individuals wearing them and using the products. Her study also hasn't been peer-reviewed. Dr. Devin Williams, the lead toxicology research and development person at Lush Fertilizer, will confirm that the use of Lush fertilizer is not correlated with an increase in developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or any other cancer. Dr. Williams will also point out the discrepancies in Dr. Rogers' study. Carson Durst was someone who worked on the development of Drufo. Carson's responsibility while working for Lush was to research the safety of a particular chemical compound. Even though it was Carson's responsibility to talk about safety concerns surrounding this compound, she never did until she began working for Terra's Greenery, Lush's biggest competitor. Skylar Weirs is an investigative journalist whose responsibility is to put out information that is true and accurate. Skylar will explain to you how that Drufo is a much safer alternative than the use of most other fertilizers and pesticides, and that there is a much clearer link between the use of those pesticides in cancer than the use of Drufo in cancer. We are in this courtroom today because of negligence, which is when a person's failure to use reasonable care causes harm. Both the plaintiff and defense have to meet a burden of proof, which is preponderance of the evidence. Think of preponderance of the evidence like a scale of justice. On the defense's side, how much Dakota Weirs was negligent. On the plaintiff's, how much Lush Fertilizer was negligent. If you believe that Dakota Weirs is completely at fault for not following safety recommendations, you must turn in a verdict for the defense. If you believe that Lush Fertilizer is completely at fault for not warning their consumers about the possibility of harm while using their products, you must turn in a verdict for the plaintiff. If you believe that Lush Fertilizer is at fault, you must also consider how much Dakota is at fault and how much her negligence contributed to her harm. Members of the jury, at the end of this trial, you'll find that Drufo isn't the reason Dakota developed cancer. It was her lack of responsibility that did.
Thank you. Plaintiff's first witness, please.
Your Honor, we call Dakota Weirs to the stand. Could you please state your full name and spell the last for the court?
My name is Dakota Weirs, W-E-I-R-S.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Can you tell the court why you're here today?
I'm here today to sue Lush Fertilizer for their use of Drufo.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm currently unemployed.
Have you had a previous occupation? And if so, where were you employed?
I used to work at Haven Landscaping as a landscaping technician.
How long did you work there?
I've worked there since I was 14 years old.
And how old are you now?
I'm now 20.
What were your responsibilities at your job?
At that time, I was too young to be operating heavy machinery, so I was tasked with spreading the grass and fertilizers.
And what type of materials and chemicals did you work with?
I worked with various chemicals, one of which was Lush Fertilizer.
While working with these, were you advised to wear long sleeves, pants, and gloves?
My boss did advise me, but I agreed. I thought that it was often too hot to be wearing the long sleeves and pants.
Did any of your colleagues who use Lush fertilizers wear long sleeves, pants, or gloves?
No, all my colleagues agreed it was often too hot within the area we were working to wear long sleeves and pants.
And were any of your colleagues diagnosed with the same condition you have?
To my knowledge, none of them have been diagnosed.
Do you regret not wearing protective gear?
I do regret it. I feel like because of my diagnosis, I'm not able to do the things that I used to do. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma has caused a lot of detriment to my body. I'm often fatigued and short of breath. I bruise easily and my lymph nodes swell to an uncomfortable and painful level.
I'm sorry to hear that, Ms. Weirs. You mentioned your condition was non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Could you further explain what that is?
It's a non-hereditary form of cancer that you can get from the environment.
And prior to being diagnosed with this condition, what did you do?
In addition to my job at Haven Landscaping, I was very active in the community, doing a lot of community service. I also played the piano. I was so good that I won a full ride scholarship to Juilliard, which is this really prestigious music college in New York. I was also part of school clubs like NHS.
And why won't you be able to attend Juilliard anymore?
I won't be able to attend Juilliard because my body can no longer keep up with the rigorous coursework that it requires. I bruise easily, so I can't sit at the piano anymore, and long periods of time playing cause me to be fatigued and short of breath.
And how did this affect you mentally?
I felt so sad and depressed. Piano was my passion. It's been something I've been cultivating ever since my grandpa taught it to me when I was young. After he died, I started piano lessons and cultivated my talent, and losing this connection of being able to play the piano was like losing him all over again.
I'm sorry, Ms. Weirs. Ultimately, what effect has non-Hodgkin lymphoma had on your life?
It's hurt me both mentally and physically. I can't do the things I love anymore, and it's really caused me to be down, and I feel like my future is ruined.
I'm so sorry. What is the reason behind your condition?
It's the Drufo.
And what company's products use Drufo?
Lush fertilizer.
Could you explain what Drufo is?
It's this bonding agent they use in their fertilizer.
Objection. Lack of foundation.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. I was laying foundation so I could introduce a line of questioning that would refer to the use of Drufo and Lush fertilizers product. As I just mentioned that, or as we just laid foundation, that Drufo was the reason why Ms. Weirs has non-Hodgkin lymphoma and is in court today.
Anything additional, Mr. Quinn?
She hasn't testified that she knows what Drufo is other than that it's an ingredient in Lush fertilizer.
I'll sustain the objection.
Ms. Weirs, do you have a copy of Exhibit 1 available to you?
I do.
Your Honor, do you have a copy of Exhibit 1 available to you as well?
I believe that we do. I believe the scoring panelists do as well.
Let the record show that this is a clean and unmarked copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 1. I request permission to show Exhibit 1 to Dakota Weirs.
You may.
Ms. Weirs, could you please identify what Exhibit 1 is?
This was the label of the Lush fertilizer that we used while I was working at Haven Landscaping.
Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 1 into evidence at this time. The authenticity of the exhibit has been stipulated.
What is the position of the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
The exhibit will be received.
Ms. Weirs, on this label, what do you notice?
I noticed that there's some safety recommendations. There's a typo and there's potential eye irritation. That's about it.
And what is the first active ingredient on this label?
Drufo.
Could you please read out loud what is under the title Hazards?
Keep out of reach of children.
Are there any warnings under that title that elucidates the clear dangers of the Drufo used in the product?
No, there's nothing about the cancer it could cause.
Could you please read out loud the first sentence of the user safety recommendations?
As with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin.
It states, as with any fertilizer, but does it state anything showing the clear difference between Lush fertilizer and any fertilizer?
No.
And could you please read out loud the caution part on the label?
Causes eye irritation, avoid contact with eyes of clothing.
Does this part tell you to avoid clothing?
The way it's worded is very confusing. It kind of does imply that.
So what is this label trying to tell you, the consumer, in terms of protective clothing?
Because of the way it's worded and the typo, I'm very confused about what it's asking me to do, and I just don't think it was very clear.
And could you please read right under the logo as well?
For use on lawn, turf, and weed control.
Does it specify that you must use this product outdoors?
No, it does not.
Does it specify anywhere on the label that Drufo must be used outdoors?
No,
So would there have been any issue with you using the product indoors?
not based on this label.
Ms. Weirs, you also have a copy of Exhibit 2 available to you.
That is correct.
And Your Honor, do you have a copy as well?
Yes,
Let the record show that this is a clean and unmarked copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 2. I request permission to show Exhibit 2 to Dakota Weirs.
you may.
Ms. Weirs, could you please identify what Exhibit 2 is?
It's a list of ingredients for Lush fertilizer in France.
Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 2 into evidence at this time. The authenticity of the exhibit has been stipulated.
Defense position regarding the exhibit. Do you have any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, this is hearsay.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor, this is not hearsay, as I have just laid foundation using Exhibit 1 and proved that Drufo was an active ingredient in the United States in Lush fertilizer. And this is simply the same list of ingredients, however, in French.
Anything further?
Regardless of that, this document is still hearsay.
I'm going to overrule the objection and admit the exhibit.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, compared to Exhibit 1 of the ingredients of Lush fertilizer used in the United States, what is the key difference of the ingredients of Lush fertilizer used in France?
There's no Drufo
And why is this?
because it's been deemed dangerous in France.
What other countries have outlawed the use of Drufo in Lush fertilizer?
In addition to France, Liberia, Canada, Haiti, Congo, and Cote d'Ivoire have all banned it.
And is this for the same reason that France does not use it?
Yes,
And does Lush fertilizer still use Drufo regardless of the known dangers?
yes,
And does Lush fertilizer warn their consumers about possible dangers?
no,
And last question for you, Ms. Weirs. While working with Lush fertilizer, were you negligent yourself in any way?
no, I was not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. Let's begin by discussing your experience with fertilizer products. You worked for Haven Landscaping since you were 14.
That is correct.
During your employment, you worked in a variety of indoor and outdoor settings.
Yes, my job was to maintain the lawns by spreading grass, seeds, and fertilizers.
Lush fertilizer was a product you used during your employment.
Yes, that is correct.
You stopped using Lush about 3 years into your employment with Havens.
That was when Haven Landscaping stopped its use of Lush, which was quite lucky, to be honest.
For about the last half of your career at Havens, you didn't use Lush fertilizer at all.
No, I did not.
Aside from Lush's products, do you also use several other fertilizers and lawn chemicals?
Yes, I do.
Those products often had warning labels on them.
Yes, some of them had warning labels for that specific fertilizer.
You're aware that these warnings help customers take certain precautions while using potentially dangerous products?
Objection, Your Honor. Assuming facts not in evidence, my witness cannot attest to warning labels of other products that are not entered into exhibit or into evidence in court today.
Response.
She has testified that she worked with those products. I don't see why it would be necessary for us to have the products with us.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may.
She cannot testify to the exact label and the warning labels, as those are not in court today as evidence. And while she may have worked with them, she does not know the entire ingredients list nor the exact warning on the label.
Permission to respond?
Yes, you may.
I'm simply asking if she is aware that warnings on products, including Lush fertilizer, help customers take certain precautions while using them. I'm not stating anything about the ingredients in other products or the warnings on them.
I'm going to overrule the objection. You may answer the question, but if you need it repeated, Just ask.
Yes, could I have a repeat of the question, please?
Of course. You're aware that warnings help customers take certain precautions while using potentially dangerous products?
Yes, they are like warnings.
Please refer to Exhibit 1, which has already been admitted into evidence. Please follow along while I read the safety recommendations. As with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator or N95 mask is recommended. You didn't wear gloves while working with lawn chemicals?
No, I did not. It was too hot at the time.
You didn't wear long sleeves?
No, again, I didn't see the need to since none of my colleagues did, and we all agreed that it was too hot to wear it during the hotter months, so none of us did.
You didn't wear long pants?
No, again, my colleagues and I agreed it was too hot to do so.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect examination.
Yes, a few brief questions, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, would there have been any issue with you using Lush fertilizer indoors?
No, there was nothing warning against it, and that was what our company was meant to do.
And were there any other fertilizers that you used that contained the active ingredient Trufo in it?
No, Lush was the only one.
And could you please refer to Exhibit 1 once again and read the caution label?
Caution causes eye irritation. Avoid contact with eyes of clothing. Again, sorry, the typo makes it very hard to understand.
And does this section tell you to avoid clothing?
With the way it's currently worded, I would read it as that, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Recross examination.
No, not at this time, Your Honor.
Right. Thank you for your testimony. Plaintiff's next witness, please.
Your Honor, if I will have one moment while I change my name.
Certainly.
All right, at this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to call witness Carson Durst up to the stand. Good evening, Ms. Durst. Oh, thank you. Good evening, Ms. Durst. Thank you so much for being here today. Could you please state your full legal name and spell the last for the record?
Carson Durst, D-U-R-S-T.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. Could you please tell me why you are here today?
I am here to testify the truth about Blake Duncourt and his company Lush Fertilizer.
And what is the nature of your relationship with the defendant, Blake Duncourt?
Well, Blake's son Charles and I have been friends since we were very young. We played on a traveling soccer team together, which meant that we were very close throughout grade school. And that also meant that his family was like my family.
Thank you. And could you tell me a little bit about how your career began?
Of course. So right before graduation, I was still unable to find a job, and I had voiced these concerns to Charles, and he had told me that his father's company—
Objection, hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, my witness is attesting to their present sense impression. It's a direct relation that they experienced in regards to their own job and the experiences that they had leading up to their acquisition of that job. My witness is not necessarily testifying to the actions or statements of other individuals.
Anything additional, Ms. Letak?
Yes, Your Honor, not sufficient enough foundation has been laid that Carson heard these right after Charles explained this to the person or whoever, as well as that's all.
Okay. I'm going to overrule the objection. I'm not sure that you had an opportunity to fully hear the question. If you need it repeated, you may ask. If you feel you do understand the question, you may provide a response.
Thank you. Could you repeat it one more time, please?
Absolutely. Could you please tell me a little bit about how your career began?
Of course. So right before graduation from college, I was still having some trouble finding a job. And so I had spoken to Charles about these struggles. And he elaborated that his father was hiring interns at his company, Lush Fertilizer. And so I ended up getting a internship at Lush Fertilizer.
Thank you. And how did this job fare out for you in the beginning?
Well, I raced through the ranks pretty quickly. Just after about 3 months as an intern, I became a product development engineer and a full-time employee.
Thank you. And based on your perception of the work environment, why do you believe that you received this promotion so quickly at that job?
I personally believe that I was just performing at a higher rank and better, if you will, than my coworkers.
Thank you. And what are some products you worked on as lead product manager?
The biggest product we worked on was Drufo.
And what is Drufo?
Drufo is a bonding agent that was used in some of Lush's fertilizers.
And as lead product engineer, what was your understanding of the value of Drufo to Lush Fertilizer as a product?
Drufo increased the longevity and texture of Lush's fertilizers, which in turn increased and raised the significance and importance of Lush's fertilizers, putting them higher than their competitors.
And so what was your task in the assignment with Drufo?
I was tasked with studying and researching Drufo and a chemical compound in Drufo.
And how did you begin this research?
Well, personally, I started a quick search and found that in England, a woman found a possible connection to the carcinogenicity in the chemical compound in Drufo that could be carcinogen in rats.
And did you document this finding anywhere?
Yes, we all being my coworkers and I, held notebooks that contained all of our findings, and that is where I put my findings.
And did anyone review this notebook?
Jerry Langley, one of our managers, did always check through our notebooks because he was the one who would take all of our findings from our notebooks and put them all into one document that he would publish.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. Can you verify that you have a clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit 3 in front of you?
I do.
And do you recognize this document?
I do. It was the document I found from England.
Your Honor, I now move to enter Exhibit 3 into evidence. The authenticity of this document has been stipulated.
Defense position regarding the exhibit.
No objections, Your Honor.
3 will be received.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please read the title of the study at the top of the page?
Yes. Lifespan exposure to low doses of C3NO9P beginning during early life increases cancer effects in rats.
And is C3NO9P, is that the compound present in Drufo?
Yes.
And could you please summarize this study's conclusion column?
Of course. To put it simply, the results of carcinogenicity in this compound that we talked about, C3NO9P, it basically explains that at the dose level close to a normal monthly intake for humans and for rats, or that would both be carcinogenic, and in turn, those doses are too high for a normal intake for either rats or humans, specifically rats.
And so after finding this very concerning study, did you conduct any of your own studies with the scientific team into the possible carcinogenicity of Drufo?
Our team did do an in-house study.
And did any findings arise from your research team from this in-house study?
We did have a meeting and one of our scientists did raise some concerns.
Objection, hearsay.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This is permissible as a present sense impression and a past recollection recorded. My witness is not necessarily testifying as to anything beyond a practice within the job that she worked at, and with a standard practice of something that concerned both her job and her team that she managed. And so she's testifying as to something that she documented into her notebook and that happened at a meeting that she was managing. So she would have insight into what occurred.
Permission
Any
to respond.
additions? Yes, please.
I don't believe sufficient foundation has been laid that Carson Durst was present at this meeting and that they had their lab notebook with them at this meeting.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may.
My witness just testified that they were present at this meeting when this concern was brought up. And so we've established the foundation that they were both present and that they were listening to their scientific team when this concern was brought up.
Objection overruled. You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. So when was this concern? I'm sorry. Were any of your managers attending this meeting that you mentioned?
Yes, Jerry Langley and Alex Monroe were both in the meeting and listening.
And was a conclusion report published of this study after this meeting?
There was a conclusion report, but nothing that we had brought up that was, if you want to say negative, was put into that conclusion report.
So the concern was nowhere mentioned in this lab's conclusion report?
It was not.
And who is in charge of publishing this conclusion?
Jerry Langley always publishes our conclusion reports. So
And
Jerry Langley.
Are these the same people who attended the meeting when this concern from your research team was brought up?
Yes.
And was it ever formally published or stated anywhere to your knowledge that there is a possible carcinogenic risk?
Not that I know of, no.
And were any further studies launched into the possible carcinogenicity of Drufo after this concern arose from your scientific team?
No.
Thank you. And so referring back to your conclusion report, did it suggest any possible way to mitigate the safety risk?
There was a possibility of baking Drufo, which could lower the possibility of the carcinogenic properties in Drufo being toxic or dangerous. However, it was only said that that was the only possibility of baking, and there was no other studies done to see.
Thank you. And to your knowledge, did Lush Fertilizer ever bother baking Drufo?
Not that I know of, no.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, excuse me. Let's talk about the study you found during your research of a compound in Drufo that suggested this compound was carcinogenic in rats. Please refer to Exhibit 3, which has already been admitted into evidence. This is the study you believe that suggests Drufo may be carcinogenic.
That is correct.
This study intended to simulate the compound's potential carcinogenic effects.
That is correct. That's what I found from this study from England.
Specifically at a quantity similar to what humans would face in jobs involving frequent unprotected exposure.
Exactly.
Objection, Your Honor. This is outside the scope of my lay witness. They would not have any insight into the amounts that a typical person would be exposed to working with fertilizer. That's not within their lay information.
Permission to respond?
Certainly.
This conclusion is stated specifically in this study. I'm not asking the quantity they may know of that humans in jobs involving frequent unprotected exposure to this compound would face. I'm just summarizing the conclusions of this study, which Carson Durst reviewed and documented in their lab notebook and should have sufficient knowledge of.
Objection overruled. You may answer the question, or if you need to repeat what you just asked.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Specifically at a quantity similar to what humans would face in jobs involving frequent unprotected exposure to this compound.
That is true. That is also in the conclusion, yes.
According to the study, this compound was added to the rats' standard diet.
That is also true, yes.
The rats were ingesting this compound orally.
Well, yes, that's also true.
Starting on the 12th day of their lives.
That is also true.
Until natural death.
Yes.
The results show that rats that were exposed to this compound during prenatal life were more likely to develop cancer.
That is the case, yes.
Prenatal meaning before birth.
Right, yes.
You did not find any studies on this compound's effects in humans outside of Lush fertilizer.
No, this is the one source that I did find because I wasn't really able to study outside of it.
Only rats that ingested this compound orally.
That is correct.
Let's talk about your employment with Lush. While you were working for Lush, the quality of your work was criticized.
It was criticized. However, during that time, I was also still working at the same level that I believe I was working when I was given my full-time position after my internship.
Ultimately, the executive team at Lush confronted you about the mounting complaints about your job performance.
Yes, however, I still feel like I was performing at the same level that I was before.
You were put on a performance improvement plan.
That is the case, yes.
Let's discuss the non-compete agreement you had with Lush when you were employed with them. You signed a non-compete agreement with Lush.
That's the case, yes.
By signing that,
This is outside of the scope of this legal case. This non-disclosure agreement has not yet been entered into evidence, and so we cannot refer to it. And additionally, this is a legal case that is irrelevant to the court at hand because it has already been settled and finalized.
permission to respond.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Your Honor, I don't need to admit this exhibit for Carson Durst to testify to some of the contents of this exhibit. I'm also not talking about the settlement that was reached outside of court. I'm using this exhibit to specifically prove the witness's credibility in this case.
Because an objection to relevance was made, how is this bear upon her credibility?
This document, by signing this document, Carson Durst agreed to do something, and I will lay later foundation that she did not, or that she violated this agreement, and that would go against her credibility today, or bias.
If I may clarify,
Yes.
Your Honor,
Yes.
so what I'm saying is that this is assuming evidence that is not included within trial. It's assuming facts not in evidence, and so my witness at this time cannot attest to it, and so unless further foundation is laid or is it admitted as an exhibit for my witness understanding.
Permission to respond.
Yes.
I asked this witness whether she whether she signed this agreement or not, and that is sufficient foundation to start testifying to her knowledge of this exhibit. It does not need to be entered into evidence for her to testify.
I'm going to sustain the objection on relevance grounds as far as this matter is concerned.
When you were fired from Lush Fertilizer, you had already been hired by Tara's Greenery.
That is correct. I wanted to make sure that I was still able to have a way to earn money and a way to still grow as an employee, which is why I decided to find another job.
You had applied at Tara's Greenery while you were still employed by Lush.
That's correct. I had a feeling that after everyone was treating me the way everyone was treating me, I would be in some way fired, or the situation would get worse just because of how everyone was treating me.
You applied for Tara's Greenery after a particular heated conversation with Blake Doncourt.
Yes, that is the case.
You applied at Tara's to, quote, get Blake's goat.
I did. However, that was 16 years ago, and I feel like that shouldn't affect my feelings on this case today.
Blake and the CEO of Tara's Greenery has nothing but bad blood between them.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Blake Doncourt and the CEO of Tara's Greenery have nothing but bad blood between them.
Objection, Your Honor. This is speculation. This question is asking my witness as to speculate as to the relationship of two uninvolved parties that she would have no insight into.
Permission to respond.
Yes.
Foundation has been laid on direct that Carson Durst had an intimate relationship with Blake Downcourt. Carson Durst also worked at Lush Fertilizer and was able to observe things that went on in this company, and that would include any relations Blake Downcourt would have to other CEOs of other large companies.
Well, I think you can ask the witness if she knows. She may not, but you can ask her if she knows.
Ms. Durst, were you able to observe any relationships that Blake Downcourt had at his company?
I know that there was obviously competition in a small group of different companies. That's with all small fields of companies. I think I'm a little confused by the question, but did that sort of answer your question?
Terra's Greenery is one of Lush's biggest competitors.
Right, because it is also a small field, but yes.
From what you observed, Blake and the CEO of Terra's Greenery don't get along well.
Objection, Your Honor. Again, this question is asking my witness has to speculate as to the condition of the industry and a relationship within it. They would not have sufficient knowledge because they are not an expert in the industry itself. They simply worked at one firm within the industry.
I'm going to overrule the objection, but the witness may or may not know the answer. She can answer accordingly.
From what you observed, the CEO of Terra's Greenery and Blake Downcourt did not have good relations.
I would say that they definitely were competitors, so not really, but I don't think that really should have affected me personally.
When Lush found out you were hired by Terra's Greenery, a legal battle ensued.
That is the case, yes, 16 years ago, but yes.
The legal battle was about the non-compete agreement you had signed with Lush Fertilizer.
That is correct, yes.
By signing this agreement, you agreed not to disclose Lush Fertilizer's trade secrets.
That is correct, and even after I spent 6 months not working with Terra's Greenery just to make sure that that wasn't an issue.
By signing this, you also agreed to not work for a company that would benefit from the disclosure of those trade secrets.
That is correct.
You oversee Terra's Greenery's development of its line of fertilizers and lawn enhancement products.
That is correct.
In your first few years at Terra's Greenery, you've mainly worked on a new product that's on the verge of outperforming Lush Fertilizer's equivalent on the market.
Yes, that is the case.
Let's discuss some opportunities you had at Lush. You had the opportunity to directly talk to Blake Downcourt.
Yes, because we were close and because I did work there, yes.
While you were working for Lush Fertilizer, you never took the opportunity to voice any concerns about Drufo to Blake Downcourt.
Not directly to Blake, but I did write it in my notebooks that were seen by my managers.
You did not verbally disclose any concerns you had about Drufo.
To Blake?
To Blake.
Not to Blake, but to Jerry Langley, yes.
So you said you verbally spoke to Gary Langley about your concerns.
Not verbally, but I did in my notebook, which he would read consistently.
You have no knowledge of whether Gary Langley wrote down every single thing in your lab notebook.
Well, I would assume that he didn't, given that it wasn't in the final document. But I know that he is supposed to read through our notebooks to be able to comprise information to put it in a single document. However, since I didn't see it, I assume it wasn't.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect examination.
Yes, Your Honor, a brief redirect. Ms. Durst, if you documented something in your notebook, however, it was not adequately communicated through management, do you believe that's your fault?
I don't believe that's my fault. I completely put out the information and I put it in a place that was easily accessible for my management.
And would you believe that it's negligence on the management's parts if they're not adequately communicating?
Objection. Argumentative.
Your Honor, I'll go ahead and rephrase my question.
That's fine.
Is there anything you could have done about the notebooks being communicated through management?
There isn't. I put it in my notebook and it is supposed to be read by my managers and used for our documents that are all comprised into one.
And finally, Ms. Durst, would you ever lie on stand for a workplace feud that occurred over 15 years ago?
I wouldn't. I would agree that at the time it affected me, but now it wouldn't affect me at all, whatever happens here.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Recross examination.
Briefly, Your Honor. You never took the opportunity to voice concerns about Drufo to Blake Doncourt.
That is correct. However, I did write it in my notebook where Jerry Langley was supposed to see it, my manager.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you for your testimony. Plaintiff's next witness, please.
Your Honor, just one moment while I change my Zoom name.
Sure.
The plaintiff will now call Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand. Hello, Dr. Rogers. Please state your first and last name, spelling the last for the record.
I am Dr. Casey Rogers, last name spelled Rogers.
And where are you currently occupied, Dr. Rogers?
I am currently employed as a professor at UC Berkeley.
And then what fields do you teach in at UC Berkeley?
I teach 3 classes in the fields of agriculture and etymology.
And what did you do prior to your position there?
Prior, I was a student there.
And what degrees do you currently hold?
I currently hold 2 degrees, a PhD of agriculture and etymology and a bachelor's in science in agriculture and chemistry.
And did you pursue any other forms of education or training before your position at UC Berkeley?
Yes, in fact, part of my previous employment was working as a research analyst for a multinational chemical company.
And what area did you research while working there?
I researched the harmful effects to the human body that result from consistent exposure to chemicals such as Drufo.
What is the formal name of this field?
The formal name for this field is toxicology.
Has this given you any experience in expert advisory before, Dr. Rogers?
Not only has my research been used in litigation and advisory panels, but my work and experience has provided me with a wealth of information from which I can testify and draw.
And have you published any works that can provide insights into your qualifications?
Yes, I have. I have my curriculum vitae explaining my educational and professional background and a list of all of my written works.
I would like to confirm that Your Honor, co-counsel, and my witness have clean and unmarked copies of what have previously been marked as Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 7.
Yes, I do.
Yes, thank you.
Do you recognize these documents, Dr. Rogers?
Yes, in fact, I do.
And what are these documents?
These documents are my curriculum vitae and a collection of all of my written works.
And these give proper insight into your qualifications?
Yes, in fact, they do.
Your Honor, I offer to admit Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 7 into evidence at this time.
Any objection to 6 and 7?
No objection, Your Honor.
Both are received.
And with the qualifications admitted to the jury, I would now offer Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert witness in the fields of horticulture, entomology, and toxicology.
As to that proffer of the expertise, what is the defense position?
No objection, Your Honor.
The witness is so qualified and may give opinion testimony within her fields of expertise.
Thank you, Your Honor. Moving on to the case at hand, when did you first become familiar with Dakota Weir's situation?
When I was asked to testify on this case.
And where did you start in your research?
I started by overseeing Ms. Weir's medical records.
And what did you find within these records?
I found she was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And in your research as an expert, what have you found to be linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Consistent exposure to Drufo.
And how did you come to this conclusion in your research?
I came to this conclusion through my study.
Could you please briefly explain how this study operated?
My study contained 3 groups. One group of people who were never exposed to Drufo, a second group who was occasionally exposed to Drufo, and a third group who was consistently exposed to it. My results proved Drufo's carcinogenicity.
So to clarify, there was a group that was never exposed as a control?
Correct.
Now, what exactly did you conclude from this study?
I concluded that those who were exposed to Drufo on a consistent basis were 10 times more likely than those who were never exposed to develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and those who were occasionally exposed were 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma than those who were never exposed.
Now, Dr. Rogers, what initially brought Drufo to your attention?
When I first saw it brought to market, in my professional opinion, I believed it to be rushed there.
And had there been any previous problems displayed in the scientific community pertaining to Drufo before?
Yes, in fact, it had been proven carcinogenic in rats and had been banned in many European countries.
So in your study pertaining to real-world conditions, why did you focus specifically on Drufo rather than the other chemicals that these participants could have possibly been exposed to?
Drufo contained a host of information and research to its detriment regarding carcinogenicity, whilst other chemicals did not contain that same host of information against them.
And with your experience advising large companies like Lush, why do you believe it was rushed to the market?
It was rushed to market, in my professional opinion, because of its immense success. Had they waited, another company may have overtaken them.
And in your expert opinion, is there a causal link between Dakota Weir's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and the product Drufo?
In my professional opinion, that is the case.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers. Let's start by discussing your testimony here today. This is the first time you've ever had to testify as an expert witness?
Yes, it is. However, my work has been used on many litigation and advisory boards, which does give me a host of practice in advising major corporations on how to deal with chemicals similar to Drufo.
If this case goes the way you want, it will open the door to class action lawsuits.
It will. However, my presence here is not out of any monetary benefit or any wish for monetary benefit.
You want to be on the forefront of these battles?
Yes, because I believe that people have the right to know about any dangers present in chemicals they could be working with on a daily basis.
Let's talk about your study on Drufo. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma can be caused by pesticides?
Yes, indeed, it can be.
You conducted your own study on non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Yes, that is the case.
The people who were exposed to Drufo for long periods of time were farm laborers?
Yes, they were.
Being farmers, they also could have been exposed to pesticides as well.
Yes, however, many pesticides already had a large amount of information to their benefit regarding carcinogenicity. However, Drufo has many concerning studies to its detriment regarding carcinogenicity.
But really your farmers were exposed to a number of different dangerous environmental conditions that also could have caused Dakota's non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Yes, however, the risk involved with those different chemicals was not as important to my experiment because those chemicals had been tested and had not been proven carcinogenic or dangerous in the way that Drufo has been.
That's a yes, though. Your farmers were exposed to a number of different dangerous environmental conditions.
Farmers were exposed to other chemicals whilst working.
Let's move on to your suggestions on how to avoid non-Hodgkin lymphoma. You advise that anyone working with Drufo should wear long sleeves and long pants, correct?
I would advise so.
Ms. Weirs did not wear any protective gear?
She did not, however, her conditions and the immense heat she was working in did not allow her to do so.
Ms. Weirs was advised to on Lush's fertilizer labels?
The label was, albeit a slight bit confusing, but it did recommend, it both recommended to wear clothing and it also explained to avoid clothing, which was a strange contradiction.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect examination.
Brief redirect, Your Honor. First off, I would like to ask you, Dr. Rogers, Is there a large host of variables present in real world science rather than laboratory science?
Yes, there is. However, only one variable truly mattered, which was Drufo in of itself.
And do you have control over all of these variables present?
No, I do not. However, they had very little bearing on my experiment.
So how do you make sure that these other variables are controlled and you can focus on Drufo?
Those other variables were controlled before the experiment even began. Those other chemicals had gone through extensive testing regarding their safety. However, Drufo had not been.
Now, in your experience as a litigator and expert advisor, do you advise the companies or the consumers in your position?
I advise companies so that companies can do their best to keep their workers safe.
And do you advise them to create warnings, or do you advise people to follow these warnings?
I advise companies to create warnings.
Now, finally, I want you to answer this as honestly as you possibly can. Do you want to have to be here in court today testifying to a life ruined?
I do not. I have a moral obligation to be in a court like this to prove carcinogenicity of a chemical that has ruined a young woman's life.
Thank you. No further questions.
Recross examination.
Briefly, Your Honor. Only one variable mattered to you?
Yes, indeed. Other chemicals in my experiment had already been tested enough to prove their non-carcinogenicity. Therefore, leaving Drufo as the only variable truly affecting my outcomes.
You ignored other possibly dangerous variables?
I did not ignore them as they had already found previous testing to their benefit. They were not ignored. They were checked off the list of things that I knew needed to be dealt with before the experiment began.
Pesticides can be considered carcinogenic, correct?
Yes, however, most other chemicals in this situation had been proven non-carcinogenic.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you for your testimony. The defense's first witness, please.
The defense calls Blake Doncourt to the stand. One moment, Your Honor, while I rename myself in the Zoom call.
That's fine.
Good afternoon, Mr. Doncourt. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Blake Doncourt. That's spelled Doncourt.
Let's begin by talking about your occupation. What is your job?
I am the founder and CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
How did you expand Lush Fertilizer into what it is today?
Since the year 2000, I've taken Lush from a no-name fertilizer product to one of the top fertilizer companies in the market.
What is Lush Fertilizer's core product?
Our core product is our Star Lush Fertilizer, and it has bonding agent called Drufo.
Let's talk about one of the people who helped develop Drufo. How do you know Miss Durst?
She was my son's best friend, and in 2003, I gave them an internship here at Lush in our R&D department.
When Miss Durst was working for you, did she ever talk about her concerns with Drufo?
She never brought up any sort of concerns with me or anyone else at Lush about Drufo.
To your knowledge, are managers on your team supposed to bring you concerns if they find any?
Always. I want to make sure that our products are always environmentally and humanely safe.
Did managers ever bring concerns to you about Drufo?
No one personally brought anything up to me about Drufo being a concern.
Did your company have an implicit rule that there should be no written communication regarding safety concerns about Drufo?
Never have any sort of rule like that. We would always want to make sure our products are safe for the environment and for people.
Let's talk about the non-compete agreement Ms. Durst had with Lush at the time of her employment. What does this non-compete agreement outline?
Basically, to summarize, it says that if Carson were to leave our company, which she did, that they would not disclose any of our trade secrets.
Do you believe Ms. Durst disclosed trade secrets?
I absolutely believe that
Objection,
they
Your Honor.
violated.
Speculation.
Permission
Response?
to, Your Honor, Mr. Doncourt is only testifying to what he personally believes, not what other people believe.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Yes.
Mr. Doncourt cannot speculate as if to Ms. Durst shared secrets with another company or not, since there's no way to verify that in court today.
Well, I'll sustain the objection, but I will let you lay a foundation for the witness's knowledge if you wish to do so.
Is it standard practice for people at your company to sign non-compete agreements?
Of course, we don't want any of our own personal trade secrets leaking out to other companies so they can take advantage of our hard-earned work and knowledge.
What do these non-compete agreements outline?
They outline that people will not disclose any of our own trade secrets.
To your own knowledge, do you believe Ms. Durst disclosed trade secrets?
I absolutely believe that they did. After they scared off the Terrace Greenery, our biggest competitor, they released a fertilizer that's similar to Lush in every single way, and they're claiming it's non-carcinogenic.
Let's move on to talking about concerns surrounding Drufo. Did any of the studies Lush conducted conclude that the use of Drufo causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Our own toxicology research, led by Dr. Devin Williams, showed that there is no carcinogenic qualities of Drufo, let alone any sort of health risk with Drufo.
Was this verified by any outside organizations?
Yes, even the EPA did their own outside and separate research showing that Lush fertilizer and intern Drufo was non-carcinogenic.
Were you ever given a reason to be concerned about Drufo?
I was never given any sort of valid reason inside Lush or outside Lush that Drufo was carcinogenic.
What would you have done if there were valid scientific studies that had indicated there were risks from using Drufo?
If there were any valid studies showing that Drufo was carcinogenic, I would have immediately pulled it from our fertilizer, and I would have my research and development team make a new bonding agent to do what Drufo could clearly not.
What safety recommendations are on Lush fertilizer's labels?
That you wear basic long-sleeve pants and shirts, and that you wear some facial covering.
Are these recommendations stated in a clear manner?
Yes, they are very clearly stated on all of our products.
Are these instructions, in your opinion, clear to understand?
They are very clear and easy to understand.
Let's talk about baking Lush fertilizer's products. Why would the company consider baking its products?
It will remove a theoretical risk that a fertilizer might be carcinogenic.
Why doesn't the company bake its products?
It is far too costly for what little or really no risk there is.
What was the estimated total revenue loss from 2004 to 2014 if your company had baked its products?
That would have been over $10 million. And you gotta understand, as a small company at the time, that is a lot of money to lose.
How did you use the money that was saved from not baking your products?
Well, we're able to give our employees some of the best salaries and benefits in the business, but we're also able to give 10% of our profits into charities and to our own charity set around the world, removing our world's nitrogen footprint, which really is an underrated aspect of our world's pollution.
Has Lush Fertilizer won any awards for its charity work?
Yes, Lush has won the Business Seal of Sustainability, and I was personally nominated for a sustainability award by the UN.
How does Lush's charity work contribute to your products?
It shows to our consumers that we want to be environmentally and humanely safe.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Doncourt. Do you work for Lush Fertilizer?
I mean, of course, I founded the company myself, and I am the CEO there.
Mr. Doncourt, for expediency's sake, a yes or no answer will suffice for all of my questions. Is Drufo used in Lush Fertilizer?
Of course.
And you've recently been through a divorce, correct?
Objection. Relevance.
Response?
I'm laying down the foundation for the financial incentive Mr. Doncourt has in this case, and to show the jury his personal bias within his testimony, Your Honor.
Permission to respond.
You may.
Whether Blake Doncourt how much money Blake Doncourt may or may not be paying to his spouse is not relevant, as the company makes enough revenue and Blake Doncourt doesn't need that to pay his spousal supports.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
No, I'm going to overrule the objection, but I will certainly permit redirect examination dealing with this issue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, you were ordered to pay your ex-wife a large sum of money, correct?
Yes, this was
And
back.
would you agree that $1.6 million is a lot of money?
Yeah, that is a lot
Right.
of money.
And do you have a copy of Exhibit 8 available to you, Mr. Doncourt?
Yes, let me pull that up real quick.
Your Honor, do you have a copy as well?
Yes.
Let the record show that this is a clean and unmarked copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 8. I request permission to show Exhibit 8 to Blake Doncourt.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Doncourt, could you please identify this piece of evidence?
Yes, this is a profit chart that I made back in, I want to say 2003, 2004.
Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 8 into evidence at this time. The authenticity of the exhibit has been stipulated.
Position regarding Exhibit 8 from the defense.
I don't believe sufficient foundation has been laid to admit this exhibit.
I'll overrule the objection.
I also object to hearsay.
Your position regarding hearsay.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor. While entering this piece of evidence, Mr. Doncourt did just testify that this was a table that he himself created. So this would not be hearsay.
Permission to respond.
Yes.
This is still an out-of-court statement being used for the truth of the matter asserted.
And under Rule 8036, it is a business record and may be used in court today.
I'm going
Permission.
to overrule the objection and allow you to ask about it.
Mr. Doncourt, this document shows that your net profit without baking would have been roughly around 1.6 million, correct?
Yes, that looks to be correct.
And just to clarify, if you lose this case today, you would be made to pay a large sum of money, yes or no?
Yeah, I would assume so.
And Mr. Doncourt, in your previous testimony within your direct examination, you stated that you didn't bake the Lush fertilizer because you were a small business and couldn't afford to lose that much money, correct?
And plus, it's pointless because there's no risk of our fertilizer being.
Mr. Doncourt, you did state that you were a small business.
Objection. Can my witness fully respond to the question?
Once again, I think I will overrule the objection, but certainly allow you to readdress the matter on redirect examination.
Mr. Doncourt, thank you, Your Honor. Just to clarify, Mr. Doncourt, you did state that you were a small business in your previous testimony, and you also did state that you had been a recipient for the prestigious Seal Business Sustainability Award, as well as being nominated for the United Nations Champions of the Earth Award. Are these typically awards that small businesses would receive?
No, but those are rewards that we have now received as a bigger company.
Right, and stating that as you are a bigger company, losing that $1.6 million wouldn't affect your company's revenue that much and would have been much safer to mitigate the risk of the carcinogenicity of Drufo with baking it, correct?
Objection. Compound question.
I'll rephrase, Your Honor.
You may.
Seeing as that you are a bigger company, losing $1.6 million and gaining $18 million as Exhibit 8 states wouldn't be that much of a direct hit to the revenue of your company, correct?
Actually it would have, especially at that time, and that's why I made the decision not to bake our products.
So your main concern with refusing to bake Drufo is because of the expenses, correct, Mr. Doncourt?
Yes, because there's no risk of it being carcinogenic, so why would we need to bake our products?
Right, and 1 second, Mr. Doncourt. You claimed that your research on Drufo's safety was extensive, correct?
It was very extensive. Like I said, we want to always be safe with our products.
Meaning you went above and beyond to ensure that every finding of your research team was thoroughly investigated, correct?
Of course.
And when Carson Durst published his findings in his notebook, you launched an in-house study to investigate, yes or no?
Can you re-ask that question?
Yes, Mr. Doncourt. So when Carson Durst published his findings in his notebook, you were the one who launched an in-house study to investigate, correct?
Yes, I do believe that is the case.
And you launched this in-house study because you were concerned that there might be a risk of Drufo, correct?
Of course, but this in-house study did not find any sort of concerns with Truffaut.
And Mr. Doncourt, just to clarify, you did state that had there been any significant verifiable risk or any possible risk that Drufo was carcinogenic, you would have never allowed the company to put it out on the market, correct?
Yes, but guess what? There was no verifiable risk that we investigated.
There were brought up concerns with Carson Durst and that it was possibly linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, correct?
Not to me personally.
Mr. Doncourt, you previously just testified in my previous question that this concern was brought up to you and you were aware of it.
I was
Objection.
not brought up that it was made by.
Hold on just a moment, please. Yes, the objection?
I don't believe my witness has testified to this.
I may respond, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
I did just ask the question, and during the study, you launched this in-house study because you were concerned that there might be a risk of Drufo due to, Carson Durst's expressed concern of it. And Mr. Doncourt did respond yes to that question, meaning he was well aware of the carcinogenicity of Drufo.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
Mr. Doncourt was aware of the carcinogenicity, but not because of anything Carson Durst brought up specifically. And although Carson Durst did document this finding in their lab notebook, that's not the reason Blake Doncourt reinitiated this study.
Objection is overruled. However, again, you may inquire further on redirect examination.
Seeing as both Mr. Doncourt and his attorney have both verified that Mr. Doncourt is well aware of the carcinogenicity of Drufo, I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect examination.
Briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, do you have a financial bias, did you have a financial bias for your company to succeed because you had to pay spousal reports?
I never have and never will have any sort of financial bias like that.
Did any outside companies verify the safety of Lush Fertilizer and Drufo?
Yes, like I stated earlier, you don't have to take my word that Drufo isn't carcinogenic. You can also take the EPA's word. Like I said earlier, they did their own separate research showing that Drufo is non-carcinogenic.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Recross examination.
Yes, Your Honor, I have a very brief recross. Mr. Doncourt, you also testified in your original direct that on your label it states that wearing pants and shirts is necessary.
Objection.
Correct?
Outside of the scope of redirect.
Response?
Your Honor, just to clarify, am I not allowed to ask Mr. Doncourt to testify to his own prior testimony in court today?
Well, the recross examination should concern those matters that were brought up on redirect examination.
Then I have no further recross questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The next defense witness, please.
The defense calls Skylar Weirs to the stand. Please allow me a moment to change my Zoom name.
Certainly. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Skylar Weirs, spelled Weirs.
Let's begin by discussing your work. What is your occupation?
I'm an investigative journalist and a freelance writer.
What type of work do you do as an investigative journalist?
Well, I investigate different topics, and as a freelance writer, I write about them in magazines.
Do you write for a specific magazine?
I do. I write for The Rationalist.
What types of articles are typically published by The Rationalist?
The Rationalist is published by the Rationalist Society, a nonprofit organization that is devoted to promoting healthy scientific skepticism and resisting the spread of pseudoscience, irrational beliefs, superstition, things of the sort. And the rationalist just goes along with that really, as well as publishes things on, more scientifically politicized topics like climate change and GMOs.
What have you spent time researching recently?
I have spent about a year now researching and reviewing publications by the USDA and the NASDA on modern agritech because my editor picked me to write a series on it. Coincidentally, right before Dakota's diagnosis, I'd authored an article that just questioned the causal link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Your Honor, I move to admit Skylar Weirs as an expert in the field of modern agricultural technology on the basis of her knowledge.
The position of plaintiff regarding this offer of the expertise.
Yes, Your Honor. If I may, a brief voir dire.
You may.
And before I begin, may I request my timekeeper to provide me with my remaining time on cross?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Weirs, you have no formal education, correct?
No, but my knowledge base includes general knowledge with historical and statistical information, so it's really not that necessary.
Okay, thank you. And you have never conducted a study of your own, correct?
Well, no, I don't really have the resources at the moment, but I have researched so many studies and articles that it's not necessary.
Thank you. Yes or no questions will suffice for the majority of my questions, Ms. Weirs. You have no experience working in the agritech industry, correct?
No, but I research a lot about it and I have so much perspective.
And you've been writing about it for about less than a year?
Yeah, but I mean, I've researched over 100 articles and looked at credited institutions.
But you have no experience in the scientific field, correct?
Well, not like hands-on experience, I guess, but I have written a lot about it.
And you research your writing with information and data you find from other experts, correct?
Credited sources like the United States Department of Agriculture and the National Association State Department of Agriculture.
Okay. But you have no formal expertise in interpreting and validating scientific data.
Well, no, but I really do consolidate all the data that I find into my own research.
But as stated, you have no no scientific knowledge or experience, nor any knowledge or experience in interpreting scientific data.
Not really needed. I get enough training with what I do.
Okay, and agritech is a scientific field, correct?
I guess you could consider it that.
So you are publishing your layman's perspective and interpretation of expert reports that you read, correct?
Like I said, I've spent so much time researching. I doubt anybody has the perspective that I do outside of like the USDA and NASDA on topics that I research and write about.
But to reiterate, you are publishing your layman's interpretation, being that you have no scientific expertise, as you testified, of expert reports, correct?
I guess.
So you only have information to the behavior of the industry, but none of the actual scientific aspects, correct?
Not exactly, because I've looked at so many research publications and articles and studies. I've definitely investigated all of the science behind everything that I write. So it's not exactly like I'm putting out misinformation.
But you report that coming from a perspective of no scientific knowledge or experience, correct?
I mean, I have scientific knowledge, but.
Okay. Your Honor, in pursuant to Rule 702, at this time I object to the defense's tendering of Skylar Weirs as an expert witness in agritech due to that we have established that agritech is a scientific field and due to her lack of expert knowledge relating specifically to the scientific data that she published in her writings. While she may be able to attest to the conduct of the agritech industry itself, she lacks the scientific expertise to testify or make any inferences as to the scientific conclusions because she has no experience or education in the scientific field, rather only the journalistic field, reporting on secondary accounts from that field.
Attorney Quinn, if you wish to respond immediately, you may, or if you wish to ask further questions of your witness, you may.
Or respond. First, I would refer to the court's pretrial ruling, which states that if Ms. Weirs testifies to her considerable time researching agritech companies, those facts are sufficient to establish that Ms. Weirs has specialized knowledge beyond that of an average person, and that Ms. Weirs would be allowed to provide expert testimony regarding agritech. For a witness to be entered as an expert, they only need to meet one of the 5 qualifications, and she's being entered on the basis of her knowledge, not on education or experience.
Your Honor, if I may briefly respond to that Rule 702, the invocation of that. Well, that actually that won't cover that won't allow her to actually make inferences into the scientific field. We've established that she has no actual education or expertise in the scientific field. So while she may report to her what she read from other scientists, she can't make any scientific inferences herself. So that would be like, if she was to testify to any medical inferences or the carcinogenicity of that.
Permission to respond, Your Honor.
Well, I think at this time, what I will do is, based on the court's pretrial ruling, I will allow the witness to testify as an expert. Certainly, however, I will permit further questioning by cross-examination. And also, I will allow argument at the appropriate time regarding the weight that should be afforded this witness's testimony. You may proceed.
Let's move on to talking about pesticides. From what you've learned from your research, what ingredients are commonly found in pesticides?
Well, some of the most common pesticides contain some pretty well-known carcinogens like nitrates, arsenic, glyphosate, etc., and synthetic nitrogen as well, which is horrible for the environment.
How do pesticides work?
Pesticides and herbicides, by definition, are a poison. They're designed to kill. Herbicides especially kill common weeds like clover, for example. The issue there is that common weeds are necessary to pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and deposit it into the soil, because without that nitrogen, nitrogen being transformed into nitrates, the soil cannot support the type of grass typically used for a lawn.
From all of the different pesticides that you researched, did you find any ingredients that were notable?
Nitrogen, definitely. It's known to have many adverse health effects on the human body, for example, diabetes, thyroid issues, methemoglobinemia, which is more commonly known as blue baby syndrome, during pregnancy, even neural tube defects, and one of the most important, cancers.
What is the significance of these pesticides that are in other grass seed products?
Glyphosate and arsenic have been categorized as carcinogens or possible carcinogens by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which means that they are pretty unsafe for humans to be around without protective clothing.
Let's now shift our attention to DRUFO. What is DRUFO?
DRUFO is a really effective bonding chemical agent that's used in lush fertilizer.
How does DRUFO work?
DRUFO bonds to both the soil and the grass, which makes it really effective and reduces the solubility of the product, which in turn reduces the nitrogen runoff and lowers the contamination of groundwater and other waterways, which is a huge environmental issue, let me tell you. And furthermore, because DRUFO is so effective, Lush's fertilizer only needs to be applied once or twice annually, unlike most other fertilizers, which need to be applied 5 or 6 times. Also, another bonus is that DRUFO reduces the use of pesticides considerably.
Are you aware of any causal link between DRUFO and cancer?
Over my year of research, I'm not aware of any study that can report that to any level of certainty that DRUFO causes cancer.
Let's now address your relationship with the plaintiff. How do you know each other?
I am Dakota Weir's twin sister.
What concerns do you have with Dakota's employment at Havens Landscaping?
I'm really not one to point fingers, but you already heard Dakota testify that she was running around not wearing the protective clothing recommended to her. I mean, it's not Lush's fault. Lush is just trying to be an upstanding company and doing good for the environment. They donate so much money to help reduce nitrogen runoff, but Dakota was running around with a lot of toxic chemicals and not being reprimanded for not using the proper protection. So it's Havens Landscaping's fault for not protecting their teenage employees.
Why are you choosing to testify against your twin?
Dakota is pointing the finger at the wrong person. Lush is a good company, and I stand by my research. They've done nothing but good for the environment. Drufo is a good thing for the world, not a bad thing, and it doesn't cause cancer. So I'm going to stand by my research, and I sympathize so much for Dakota. I really do. It's terrible that she has cancer, but I can't take the stand for her because Lush didn't do anything wrong in this situation.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you so much for being here today, Ms. Weirs. Ms. Weirs, you consider yourself an advocate of the environment, correct?
I do. I just want what's best. We have a terrible environment right now, so I need to do and help better the world.
Thank you. And yes or no, you feel that products like Drufo need to be on the market for environmentalism's sake?
I do.
And this is because your concern is environmental benefit, correct?
Yes.
And you stated that you came into your investigation with that as your main concern, correct?
Essentially, I mean, did you know that there's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico the size of New Jersey? Things like that need to be eliminated.
And so this is because this amazing cause of environmentalism is your reason for being here today, correct?
I mean, essentially, and the fact that Lush did nothing wrong, they didn't cause Dakota's cancer.
And you even stated that Drufo is a mission you believe in, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, you even stated that Drufo is a mission you believe in, correct?
Yes.
And this mission, environmentalism, would be supported through the success of Lush Fertilizers product Drufo, correct?
Well, obviously, they're only doing good for the environment. And as I've testified, Drufo is only helping the environment by reducing nitrogen runoff.
So you are willing to go the lengths to defend Lush Fertilizers product for environmentalism's sake?
I mean, yes, that's why I'm here today.
And so environmentalism, that's your personal motive, correct?
I would say so, yeah.
So you are willing to support Lush Fertilizer for a personal motive, correct?
The personal motive being environmentalism.
So you are biased towards Lush Fertilizer's success today, correct?
Can you clarify on that question, please?
Being that you just previously stated that Lush Fertilizer's success would support your environmentalist stance, you are biased towards Lush Fertilizer's success today, correct?
Yes, I mean, have you heard of Old Guard? It's this old agri-tech sector kind of thing where older companies try to stop new companies from coming up.
Okay. So as you previously said, you came into your investigation with that bias that you just stated you had, correct?
Not exactly. I mean, if you're talking about the research that I did, I went in questioning the link.
You did state that you came into it with it as your main concern previously, did you not?
Come into what exactly? Can you clarify?
Come into your investigation, correct?
My investigation of what? I'm sorry.
With environmentalism as your main concern.
Main concern. I'm sorry. I'm confused on your question.
I'll restate. I'm sorry. I understand that might be a little confusing. Did you or did you not just state that you came into environmentalism, came into the study with environmentalism as your main concern, as stated in your affidavit?
Kind of, but not really.
And you just admitted that that main concern was a bias towards Lush Fertilizer success, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if Lush loses, they're going to lose a lot of supporters, and I don't want that. They're doing good.
Okay, and so as a reporter, you report your perspective of cases and information that you read, correct?
Based on all the research, I do give an opinion, but my research is so extensive that
thank you.
True and accurate.
And so do you believe that coming into this case with the personal bias that you just stated would affect your interpretation of the data that you are reading?
No.
You don't believe so?
I don't believe so. I mean, I've looked at the data that I've read, and my data says, like I testified, I'm not aware of any study that has established a causal link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or cancer in general. So I came into this case based on my research. The environmentalism is a benefit, however.
Okay, so thank you. But as you stated, so from the beginning, as you were researching and reporting on agri-tech, you have had a bias towards Lush Fertilizer success, correct?
Because I mean, I got the bias after I learned about what a good company they were.
And that was from the beginning, correct? That was from the beginning.
Not exactly. I mean, I came into the bias after I researched and understood the information.
But did you not just attest that you came into it with that as your main concern?
I came into this case because I stand by my research, but I did not go into studying agritech without any knowledge previously, thinking that Lush is such a great company. I had to do research to make that opinion.
Thank you so much. No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect examination.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you for your testimony. The defense's next witness, please.
Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Doctor, please state your name and spell your last for the record.
My name is Devin Williams, Williams.
What is your education?
I got my PhD from the Colorado State University, which is in Fort Collins, and I did a postgrad pharmacotoxicology program at the University of Utah.
And how long have you been leading Lush's toxicology research and development labs?
7 years now.
How long have you been working for Lush as a whole?
10 years.
What do you need to know as the leader of Lush's research and development labs?
I need to know a variety of things, but the main things are I need to understand and know how to evaluate research and test results. And then I also need to understand and know about biological systems and how they affect environmental interventions with toxic chemical agents.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to tender Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in the field of toxicology research and development on the grounds of her education and experience.
What is the position of plaintiff's counsel regarding that expertise?
The plaintiff would like to conduct a brief voir dire, Your Honor.
You may.
Dr. Williams, do you have a copy of Exhibit 9 in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, do you also have a copy of Exhibit 9?
Yes.
And co-counsel?
Yes.
Could you please tell me what this document is?
This is all of my experience.
Perfect. So this is a clear and accurate representation of your qualifications?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion to admit Exhibit 9 into evidence at this time?
Any objection to Exhibit 9?
No objection, Your Honor.
It's received.
Thank you, Your Honor. So on Exhibit 9, it outlines your education and the classes you teach along with prior experience. Within this, may I please get clarification from the co-counsel of what you are attempting to tender this witness in?
I'm tendering this witness as an expert in toxicology research and development.
Perfect. On this document, it explains that you teach classes in forensic toxicology, along with you have your degrees in forensic toxicology and your previous experience have all been in forensic and pharmaceutical toxicology. Is that correct, Dr. Williams?
Yes, it appears so.
So pharmaceutical pertains to drugs and forensic pertains to post-mortem autopsies, correct?
Yes.
Could you please explain to me how this applies to the case today?
Well, I'm personally not talking about forensics. I'm personally talking about toxicology, which is the study of toxins, which is so incredibly important in this case because so much of what we're talking about is to deal with toxins and especially chemicals and stuff.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get a better understanding of the extent of this toxicology goes because it is a broad subject. So would you please go down to the bottom of the first page of Exhibit 9 where it says Larimer County Office of Chief Medical Examiner Toxicologist, and please read from performed to insults.
Okay. Performed the methods of forensic toxicological analysis of human samples collected at autopsy used to determine the roles of drugs and other toxic chemicals in establishing the cause of death for medico-legal investigation. analyze the result of chemical analysis to identify potential toxic insults.
So this is a fair and accurate representation of your role at Larimer County offices?
At that specific job, yes.
Thank you. Pursuant to Rule 702, because they have not expressed any expertise outside of the fields of forensic and pharmaceutical toxicology, I move for them to be tendered as witnesses as that and not be able to comment on clinical, lab, or chemical toxicology.
Permission to respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
My witness has experience as the lead of Lush's toxicology research and development labs. They've been working there for 7 years. They have more than enough qualification in the experience category for what I'm trying to tender them as, which is an expert in the field of toxicology, research, and development.
I'm going to overrule the objection and allow the witness to testify as an expert in the fields that have been offered, in which she has been offered, and she may give her opinion testimony regarding those fields.
Let's discuss DRUFO. What is DRUFO?
DRUFO is a chemical bonding agent which is in fertilizer, and it prevents nitrogen runoff, and it makes things stick together in the fertilizer, and it's what makes our company environmentally friendly.
Is DRUFO banned anywhere around the world?
Yes, it's banned in Europe.
Why is DRUFO banned in Europe?
It's not banned in Europe due to cancerous risk. It's because the EU performs laboratory tests and they don't want nitrates to be produced in those laboratory tests.
Can you elaborate more on those laboratory tests?
Yes. So basically, the EU takes new fertilizer and new fertilizer components, puts them in a petri dish with the bacteria. So while our fertilizer significantly reduces the nitrate runoff, it technically still has nitrogen in it. Therefore, when it's put in a petri dish with the right type of bacteria, it produces the same amount of nitrogen as any other fertilizer. But this isn't what happens in nature for our product.
Let's talk about the cancer risks, if any, with DRUFO. Is there any risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma with DRUFO?
No, there's no statistical increase in non-Hodgkin lymphoma and DRUFO compared to
Why can't you say that it just doesn't cause cancer?
Well, that's because that's not how science works. To put it simply, if you take a large group of people and take their statistics, they will statistically, one of them or a few of them will gain or develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma or any other cancer in that matter, not because of its connection to a specific study or such as DRUFO, but simply because it's a large group of people.
Did you look at any other data pertaining to users of DRUFO?
Yes, of course we did.
Does any of the data show a risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
No, none of our results show an increase and correlation between non-Hodgkin lymphoma and DRUFO.
Why do you compare DRUFO to other fertilizers?
Because if you want accurate results and valid results, you have to compare apples to apples or fertilizers to other fertilizers.
I'd like to move on to discuss the study conducted by Dr. Casey Rogers. Have you read the study conducted by Casey Rogers pertaining to DRUFO?
Yes, I have.
In your opinion, is there anything wrong with Dr. Rogers' study?
Yes, I have a lot of concerns about the study.
And what concerns do you have with Dr. Rogers' study?
Basically, Dr. Rogers takes 3 groups of people, one of which has never stepped foot in a garden in their life, one of which who gardens as a hobby, and the last group—
Objection, Your Honor. This witness is tendered in the field of toxicology and not lab analytics.
Permission to respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
My witness has read Dr. Rogers' study. They can form their own opinion on it. And it doesn't matter if they're qualified in lab analytics, they can understand the study conducted and see what's wrong with it.
The objection will be overruled, and you may answer the question. If you need it repeated, please ask.
Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
What concerns do you have with Dr. Rogers' study?
Yes, as I stated, there is a group never set foot in a garden, people who garden as a hobby, and people who depend their income on gardening, such as farmers. And those obviously come with extremely different lifestyles, and therefore they are exposed to different chemicals and bacteria and overall environmental conditions.
Is there anything else wrong with the study?
Yes, it's never been peer reviewed, and more importantly, it's never been replicated. And that's incredibly important because science needs to be replicated, such as in Casey Rogers' case, his is not replicated.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor, but before I proceed, could I get a time check from my timekeeper on the cross-examination as well as the direct examination time left?
Yes.
I'll move forward now. Hello, Dr. Williams. I just want to ask you some questions to further the jury's understanding of the case. Is it true that lush fertilizers are banned in the European Union?
Yes, but it's not due to cancerous risk. It's due to those laboratory tests that I already talked about, and because specifically in the Petri dish situation, it produced nitrates.
So how does the Petri dish situation differ from real-world conditions that the EU studied?
Well, as I stated, because the fertilizer technically still has nitrogen in it and it's in such a closed circumstance, it produces the same amount as any other. But when put in the real world, our Drufo specifically causes our fertilizer to not have to be applied as often, and therefore it doesn't produce as much runoff because it doesn't need to be applied as often and it won't be washed away as easily.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. For the rest of my questions, they will be yes or no answers only. So just for expediency's sake, I will be asking only yes or no. Is it so? Did you just state that the lab results are different than they are found in the real world results? Yes or no?
Yes.
And with that being said, did you conduct any real world studies on the effects of Drufo in the human body or only lab condition studies?
Lush has considered real world conditions in their studies.
They have conducted real world studies. You are confirming that in testimony right now.
If you are looking at our studies, we have considered real world conditions. You can't exactly just send it out into the real world without considering the consequences. So obviously,
yes or no will do, Dr. Williams, just for expediency's sake. So you are saying you have seen real world condition studies conducted by Dr. Rogers. Is this correct?
By Dr. Rogers?
Yes. You previously testified that you have seen Dr. Rogers' study.
Yes, I have seen his study.
And are you aware of the test sizes of this group?
Of the test sizes?
You previously testified that there was large groups that were being tested.
No, that was just for a comparison of science in general, not specifically Casey Rogers.
I'll move on. So you previously testified that real world conditions are different than lab conditions. Is that correct?
Yes, lab conditions are different than real world conditions.
And do you only currently have real world eutrophication studies going on?
So for our eutrophication study, we are
yes or no will suffice, Dr. Williams. I'm sorry, the question was, do you have ongoing studies into real world eutrophication?
We are working on that, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on, what is your current position within the company?
I am the lead of the toxicology research and development labs at Lush.
Thank you. And do you have any personal stake within this company?
I work there, yes.
Do they supply your salary?
Yes, they are my employer.
And will the income of this trial have an effect on Lush's profits?
Of the income of the trial?
The outcome of the trial, will it affect the profits of Lush corporations?
That's a possibility, yes.
So you can agree that the link between income in the trial and you being a higher up within the company causes personal bias within this trial?
No, not at all. I'm here because my science is sound and because
Are you here to defend the company Lush?
Yes, of course I am.
Are you a higher up within the company Lush?
Yes, I have a very high position.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect examination.
Briefly, Your Honor, why are luscious fertilizers banned in the EU?
Because of the laboratory test I had previously talked about, and it has nothing to do with cancerous risk. It's due to the very secluded test results that they happen to make. But we have and are gaining new information about.
Objection. I believe this question is outside the scope of a redirect. My questions were not pertaining to the reason it was banned in the EU, but rather the lab conditions. And this is asking why it was banned on the basis of nitrogen rather than carcinogenic quality.
Permission to respond, Your Honor?
I think I will overrule the objection at this point and allow you to either ask your question again or have the witness complete her answer.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
No, I think it's okay. Basically, we are currently doing studies right now on eutrophication, and we have gained so much more information, and we know that our product is incredibly helpful for the environment, and we are going to send an appeal to the Europe ban.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any recross examination?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you for your testimony. I think we're ready now for closing arguments. First, from the plaintiff.
Your Honor, 1 second as I rename, please.
Yes.
Today, the plaintiff had 4 burdens of proof to prove with a preponderance of evidence in order to support their case and find a ruling for the plaintiff. First off, the defendant manufactured a fertilizer product containing a chemical compound known as Drufo. Today, that has gone completely undisputed, and both sides can agree that Blush Fertilizer did produce fertilizers that contained Drufo. Second, the defendant was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care to prevent the product from creating an unreasonable risk of harm to persons who might reasonably be expected to use the product in a manner that the defendant might have reasonably expected. For this burden, I would like to direct your attention directly to the cross-examination of witness Blake Duncourt, who in his testimony stated that he was aware of the carcinogenic risk. To corroborate that, his lawyer then also admitted to the same exact thing. So we know for a fact that the CEO of the company of Lush Fertilizer was aware of the carcinogenic risk of the product that they were giving to consumers and to workers. Secondly, they failed to provide an adequate warning label to warrant a necessity for the protective equipment. Dakota Ware's testimony showed that the warning label that they did provide was obscure, confusing, and even contained a typo. This is no warning label that would warrant any such protective measures or let any worker know that it is necessary to wear those. If they had done that, they would have provided a warning label that specifically delineated the carcinogenic risks or any risks that were life-threatening, but it didn't do that. Instead, it simply gave a mere suggestion that did not provide enough reason for the plaintiff to wear her equipment. So at the end of the day, this does not fall on the plaintiff, but rather it falls on the defense for not negating their liability. They had the ability to negate their liability in several ways. They could have created a better warning label. They could have taken up more research after their 2 studies show that there was a carcinogenic risk, and Blake Duncourt himself was aware of carcinogenic risk, but they didn't launch more studies. Lastly, they could have baked the product. As they mentioned, they proposed baking as a means of eliminating any risk. Of course, this was scientifically unsubstantiated, but they still proposed it as a method to negate and mitigate the risk. However, they still didn't do this. They didn't do this because it was too expensive. And at the end of the day, Lush Fertilizer only concern is their money, not human lives. At the end of the day, the plaintiff has overwhelmingly satisfied this burden by a preponderance of both testimonial and documented evidence. Moving on, number 3, the plaintiff was one of those persons the defendant should have reasonably expected to use the product. Again, this has gone relatively undisputed in today's case. You have seen through Dakota Ware's testimony that Drupa was a product given to her by Lush Fertilizer to use as industrial fertilizer. Evidence induced by Casey Rogers proves that Lush Fertilizer is the only probable cause for her condition. She ran a very thorough and credited scientific experiments to figure out whether or not Drupa was carcinogenic, and it showed in every single trial that carcinogenicity was proven by Drupa. We know for a fact, leading into the fourth burden, that the plaintiff had damages that were caused by the defendant's negligence, while the product was being used in a manner that the defendant should have reasonably expected. Again, because this warning label did not warrant the plaintiff to use protective measures, they should have expected that they were not going to use protective measures. That's simply logic, that's simply intuitive. Secondly, the plaintiff had damages that were caused by the defendant's negligence. Once again, we know that the company was aware of the carcinogenic risk, and because of Casey Rogers' scientific testimony and documents, we know that it absolutely was carcinogenic. So we see the connection between the two. This is negligence on Lush Fertilizer's part because they were distributing something that they thought might have been carcinogenic and ended up being carcinogenic. And at the end of the day, Dakota Wares now has cancer. Do not let the environmentalism pretext of this company sway your choice. At the end of the day, all Lush Fertilizer values is their money and their success. They do not value Dakota Ware's condition. They do not value her happiness, and they do not value her future. At the end of the day, environmentalism does not relate to this case, nor does it exculpate Lush or provide any justice for Dakota Wares. Thank you.
Defense closing argument.
May I proceed?
You may.
There are two words that can be used to describe this case. The first, responsibility. Lush is a responsible company, a company that cares about cancer, a company that cares about climate change, and most importantly, a company that cares about people, and it shows. Why do you think they are environmentally friendly, and how do you think they've successfully developed a cure to nitrogen runoff? The answer to both of these questions is through this so-called dangerous chemical, Drufo. The plaintiff speaks of Drufo as if it's some wild, dangerous chemical that causes cancer. This is not the case. What happened to Dakota Weers is truly awful, but the fact is that for 6 long years, Dakota was exposed to a number of chemicals besides Drufo that could have caused non-Hodgkin lymphoma, such as pesticides, as suggested by Dr. Casey Rogers. Now, the second word that describes this case is negligence, which brings us to another fact stated by Dr. Rogers. Dakota was exposed to all of these different environmental conditions for 6 years without proper clothing or facial protection, despite being told to wear it. Beyond any of this, we need to note that Drufo does not cause cancer. The responsible experts, the people that get their studies peer-reviewed, the people that get their studies replicated, and the people that compare the correct things are the people who are telling us that not only is Drufo not dangerous, but is a huge improvement for the environment and the people in it. Members of the jury, you've heard 6 testimonies today on the plaintiff, Dakota Weers, a person with a tragic story, but a person who was irresponsible in the face of danger when they didn't wear any protective gear whatsoever, despite a clear warning label. Carson Durst, an ex-employee of Lush who has clear motive to want to push Lush into the ground, and Casey Rogers, a person here who doesn't feel the need to replicate or peer review his study, a person who compares unreasonable variables, a person who conducts improper studies, gets incorrect results, and calls it science. And on the defense, Skylar Weers, a remarkable journalist and a master researcher who's done countless hours of research to find the correct answers. Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush, who knows the ins and outs of not only his company, but of the product that it creates, and also a responsible man, a man who donates to climate change companies. And finally, Dr. Devin Williams, a doctor who has experience with Drufo, a professional who knows how to conduct a study responsibly, and an educated person who compares the correct things and gets the correct results. Jury instruction number 2 talks about the facts that the plaintiff has to prove in order for their claims of negligence on the behalf of the defense to be considered true. The first thing that has to be proved, that Lush manufactured Drufo. This, of course, is true for environmental reasons. The second thing that has to be proven, that the defendant was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care to prevent the product from creating a risk of harm. The defense decided to not waste their money on unreasonable care because none was necessary. The third fact that needs to be proven is that the plaintiff was one of the people that the defendant harmed. While the plaintiff has an awful disease, as you've heard, Lush is not at fault. Not at fault because Dakota has been more negligent than Lush. The fourth and final fact that needs to be proven, the defendant has damages that were caused by the defendant while the product was being used in a manner that the defense should have reasonably expected. Again, there were damages, but none were caused by Lush fertilizer. And finally, the product was being used with no protective clothing and no protective gear, despite a very clear and very obvious warning label and also advisement from the employer providing the fertilizer. If the plaintiff fails to prove even one of these things, you must vote in favor of the defense. Furthermore, members of the jury, the burden of proof is preponderance of the evidence. Whoever brings you more evidence will succeed in the trial. Tell me, has the defense not met their burden? Has the defense not supplied enough evidence that to prove not only is Drufo not dangerous, but that the plaintiff is negligent? Negligent because they conduct improper studies, get improper results, and wear improper equipment in the face of danger, even when they're informed of it.
Right, thank you. And you, Mr. Tours, I believe have a short bit of time left if you wish to make a rebuttal argument.
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to utilize my remaining time for rebuttal. All right, I will begin. The defense claimed that Lush Fertilizer was responsible. Let me ask you this. Is it responsible to disseminate a product to people if you think that it has a carcinogenic risk? Now, it proved to actually be carcinogenic, but that's not the point. The point is that Blake Duncourt, the CEO of the company, believed and admitted today in the case that there was a carcinogenic risk. He had several opportunities to exculpate him from this liability, but he didn't do it. Please find a...
Right. Thank you all. Well, at this point, I'm sure everyone would who's both present for a role in these proceedings, as well as those who are watching from the gallery section, will join me in saying what a well done job this has been by all the participants. Thank you. And I'll ask that our scorekeepers, once they have completed their score sheets, if they would simply put their cameras on, I'll know that you're done and ready to move forward. I'm sure that all the participants are elated to have finished the last round for today. So just relax for a moment or two, and then we'll see if there's any comments that scorekeepers would like to give.
While they're submitting their scores, I'd just like to say we worked with some of them on the Buy Buster, and we competed against them about a month ago, and it was wonderful to see your guys' growth. You guys did wonderful. You definitely posed a tough competition to us. And then thank our co-counsel and everyone who's judging and scoring this.
Nice to hear. Ms. Farrell, do you have some comments that you'd like to make in a minute or two?
I think my biggest comment is you guys just do a fabulous job. I know how much work and time and effort you put into it. My daughter personally did mock trial in high school, which is fun to watch this side of it. So pat yourselves on the back. You all did a really good job, and I hope it'll help you for your future, because it was fun to watch. So,
Ms. Baker, maybe a minute or two's worth of comments?
So you all did really great, and I think zealous advocacy is something that is hard to capture, and I think you all did a really good job. Just remember that we're always watching, and while zealous advocacy is great, just try not to be a little too snarky sometimes. So you guys all did really great. I think, it's hard to do, and you came out and you showed up, so good job.
Ms. Barnes, Member Hughes, comments?
Well, first of all, I am blown away. You guys are amazing. I can tell that each one of you are very passionate about it, and you guys took the time to learn your case, learn your witnesses, and be prepared, and that's invaluable. I've been in the courtroom with various attorneys since 1993, and I would say that you guys are right up there and you're not far behind them. And in fact, you probably exceed some of them. So I'm super impressed. And I just thank you for putting on such a great presentation, and I commend and congratulate all of you.
I think technically we're supposed to get an all clear that everything has been turned in that needs to be. Madam Clerk, are you still out there?
I am, Your Honor. I'm not sure if Ms. Farrell gave any feedback. Did I miss it?
Did.
You did? Okay. I missed, I think, one of the scoring panelists. Maybe not. I've been sitting here watching. Is there anybody else who want to give feedback?
I think we've gone through everyone, Ms. Farrell, Ms. Baker, and Ms. Barnes.
Okay, I missed it somewhere. Judge, did you have any feedback you wanted to give to them? More
I
specific?
don't think anything very specific. I was very impressed by all of you in terms of the different kinds of roles that you assumed and the jobs that you did. I think that there's just what I would have loved to have known, and I'm afraid we don't have the time to do it, but to get feedback from you. So what I'll just ask you to do is know that I would have said, if we had the time, what did you think today in this round you did better than you've done at any of the previous rounds? Or maybe even, since you all have apparently competed against each other, even in the previous competitions. Just, even just one thing that you think you did better this time than you've done before. And the second thing to ask yourself, I guess, is just, what is the one thing that stands out to you from this round that you feel like you'd like to do differently or improve on? The reason I suggest those questions is that you may be moving on from here. And if not, in some other competition, whether it be this year or next year, thinking about those things can be really helpful in assisting in your own growth and progress. Well, best to all of you. And Madam Clerk, is there anything else we need to do?
No, Your Honor, we are all clear. Thank
Super.
you, everyone.
Take care and have a grand rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
So much.
Thank you.